In Ois base, the Rebbe brings the Braisa of the end of Maseches Nida. Over there in the Braisa, it seems like the Asher Alexandria, the Esra Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya, certain antagonistic questions they were sort of asking him. Seemingly, the Gemara calls it Buris. The Rebbe basically is going to explain exactly the various levels of these three different questions that they asked and how they follow, and how it makes perfect logical sense to the way the proceedings of these questions. The Rebbe will go into very, very great detail, and that's going to be the main thrust of this sikha, explaining these pieces. But before the Rebbe starts explaining the pieces itself, it almost seems like these issues were brought up by the Anshe Alexandria. We find in the Gemara that sometimes non-Jews, they would sort of start up, or they would ask antagonistic questions to the Chachamim. But the Rebbe says, so what's the point in trying to figure out the meaning of their questions and how it was responded? But the Rebbe says that in actuality, these questions are Torah, and these are brought down in the Gemara. We make a bracha of the Torah. These are regular parts of the Torah, and as the Rebbe goes into details, proving it about these things, that some of these questions remain and have psukim to verify them, and so it is perfectly legitimate, and not only, and we have to sit and figure out the details in this piece of the Gemara. Let's look inside. Base. So we'll understand the previous Yalkut that we quoted by first explaining in the Gemara, which is at the end of the tractate of Messiah of Nida. The Gemara brings there the Braisa. Sholu Anshe Alexandria Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya. The people of Alexandria asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya. This is quoting the Braisa. Gimel Divrei Buris. They asked him three words of Buris. Buris means empty stuff, meaning they don't have really validity. The Rebbe is going to address it, that even though they were called Buris over here, that nevertheless means that we could still go ahead and try to figure this out. So what was the three things? First, they asked like this. Ishtoi shaloit mahu she titame. We know that when Lot's wife, when the angels, they turned over Stoim, and they told him not to look back, it says that the wife of Lot looked back and she turned into a Nitziv Melech, a piece of salt. So the question was, they asked him, Ishtoi shaloit, so the wife of Lot, mahu she titame. If somebody should touch the wife of Lot, is it like a dead body? And would she be metame? Amar lahem. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya responded, Meis metame. A mace can make tame, but ein nitziv melech metame. A piece of salt cannot be metame. So they continue to ask another question. What about the ben Shunamis, the son of the Shunamis? Mahu sheyitame. Will he be metame? He was dead at one point, then he became alive. Somebody should touch the ben of the Shunamis. Is the ben Shunamis metame? Amar lahen. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya answered, Meis metame, ve'ein chai metame. That a dead body defiles, but a living person, once he was resurrected, is not metame. Then they asked the third question. Meisim lo love it. What happens with the Meisim in the future to come? Which is by Tchis HaMeisim. So, Tzrichim Hazor Shlishi Ushvi, will they require to be sprinkled on them on the third and 7 days? Or ain't Tzrichim, or they're not required? Amar lahen, so Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya said, Liksheyichyu nechakim lahem. When they will be resurrected, then we will be wise for them what they need to do. At that point, basically, we'll decide what needs to be done. We have to decide that now. Ikadamri, others said that what he said to them, when Moshe Rabbeinu will come with them. So at that time, Moshe Rabbeinu will be there. Exactly what it means is the Rebbe is going to discuss. So before the Rebbe goes into the details of the questions, the specific languages and the ideas that mentioned here, the Rebbe first explains the validity of really dwelling into the words of seemingly the Anshe Alexandria. So the Rebbe says, introduce first, but you feel more geret. We already spoke many times. That's alle kushiyos v'shailos was eine doing Gemara. That all questions and all shailos that we find in the Gemara, including the debates, the give and take, was the Chachma Yisrael gehat mit andere, that the Jewish sages had debated with others, with Tzdukim, by Susim, the Chulu, there was the Sedekites, the by Susim, etc. Other benidin dan, or like in our case, with Anshe Alexandria, people of Alexandria, Obun Zeires Svores Amokim B'Seichel. Their ideas have place in logically. In other words, we can't just discount it and say it was said by the Goyim and therefore it means nothing. That's not true. They have a place in Seichel, Oichen Seichel the Torah, including in the logic of Torah. Unafilu d'tainus u'mainus. Even those arguments and responses, was the Gemara zogt as seinen divrei hevel v'shtus, that the Gemara says about them, their words of vanity and foolishness, is not the pshat, doesn't mean as that they have really no hold in the simple logic. It means that they for sure have no room in the logic of Torah. That's not what it means. Because the Jewish sages they had nothing to dealings with these fools and these empty people. They didn't have any. And most certainly, for sure, as that their words would not have been recorded, placed in the Gemara. And this would be, we can see this from how much more so? Even if we're talking about something which is true, if it's something which is self-understood, the Gemara asks, why are you teaching this? It's obvious. So you see, when things aren't obvious, the Gemara doesn't just bring it down. So it means that when you bring it down, it means that it has some sense, that it has some idea. For them, Gofa was Chachma Yisrael. The fact itself that the sages of Israel find elsewhere, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Shimon Hananya v'chulu, they led discussions, debates, and discussions and give and take in Gemara, and it was placed in the Gemara as a chelik from Torah Shebaal Peh, becomes a part of the oral Torah. Is muchach, so it's evident as nid blois hodos amokim b'seichel. Not only is it something which has room in the logic, but it also has room in the logic of Torah. Und man kann euch von dem herausnehmen Svoris und Toishes Havana, and you can also take out ideas and additional understanding in their sugya in this discussion, the Gemara in Velchel, in which this give and take the discussion took place, so that would clarify this subject in the sugya, that subject in the Gemara. The mitvet verstandig, and with this that we're saying that every part is Torah, even those questions and answers brought in by other people, and the Gemara calls them Buris, or says that they're not really logical, but it doesn't mean that it's not. It is Torah. That's why we understand that even in a case when you're just studying that portion of Tersha Bapeh, which contains the questions and the arguments of the tzdukim are similar, is when so even when you're doing that, you still make the blessing for the Torah. So why would you make a blessing? It must mean that is Torah. How do we reconcile it with the fact that the Gemara refers to it as buris, that it's empty stuff? The Braisa refers to them as words of emptiness, of buris, ignorant words, similar. It does mitzad aprad bahem. So that's only a detail in them. Some part of it is buris. Doesn't mean the whole thing. Or the fact that it doesn't really fit in to the case at hand. And also they are divrei buris. When you measure these words, they're considered as empty words. Relative when you measure it to the wholesome of Torah, which is ours, our Torah. The Gabe Chukas Rabbi Shuba Chananya, relative to the response of Rabbi Shuba Chananya. So when you measure what they argument and their questions, and then you measure what Rabbi Shuba Chananya said, relative to that, that would be considered buris. This is actually evidence in our matter itself. Aleph. And we have three proofs for this. Number one, the Dritte Shaila von Anshe Alexandria, the third question that they asked, the Anshe Alexandria, they asked what's going to happen when Mashiach, when the Mesim will be resurrected. Will they need the sprinkling? So of the chatos, the mei chatos. So that third question, the Anshe Alexandria, is the Choich Noch der Chuvas Rav Yeshua Mechanayim B'Tokva. So even after his answer remains in force, because he says when Mashiach will come, when they'll answer, when they get alive, so then we'll figure out. So it means that it's still a question. So it's a legitimate question. It remains. Number two, another proof is we find a discussion and differences of opinion, the earlier and the later ones, in the shailus from the Anshe Alexandria, in the questions that the people of Alexandria asked. So that's been debated, those questions. So it means not in Shuvas Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, not only in Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya's response, but so even in the question. So that means that it's legitimate because we see that their questions are debated. Number three, Gimel says Noitik Alimud Miyuchat from Posuk to Shelo Zayin dem Inyan Hatuma by Ben Shunamis Umeisim Los Lovi. We have a special Posuk that gave a Meis L'chol Nefesh Odom. So we learn Meis B'Tamei. Meis B'Tamei, that's when the Posuk. And again, the Meis L'chol Nefesh Odom, that's the Posuk that we quoted in the beginning of the Sikh from the Yalkut. So Shelo Zayin, so we need a special Posuk to reject the Inyan Hatuma Ben Hashunamis Meis Los Lovi. So it means that their argument is legitimate. So the Anshe Alexandria said, do you need to? So we said no. Other proofs. So basically, all in all, we see that the debate over here is a part of Torah, it's a logic of Torah, and therefore the Rebbe will now take this whole Gemara with their questions and learn from the various aspects of the questions. In Ois Gimel, the Rebbe now gives you a whole list of questions in the discussion of the Anshe Alexandria with Rabbi Shuba Chananya. Gimel. Mahadiyukim was in the Braisa now. Some of the questions that we can ask on the Braisa, Benegei, the Gimel Divrei Buris, as it relates to the three matters of Buddhas, of empty that they asked, challenged Rabbi Shua ben Chananya. Aleph. Farvos fragen the Anshe Alexandria, the Shaila base. Why would the people of Alexandria ask this second question? What is their question? Ben Shunamis, Sheikh Elisha, the Ben Shunamis that was resurrected by Elisha. Ma'u sheyitame lachar Sheikh Yehu. Whether he should be metame after he was resurrected by Elisha, should he be metame? Why are they asking this question after Nochdem with Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya hat Shefrer geantwortet? Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya already answered them earlier as Davke Meis metame, ve'ein nitziv melech metame. He says a mace is metame, but a pillar of salt, the wife of Lot, is not metame. But he said that you have to be a mace to be metame. Here we're talking about the Ben Shunamis after he resurrected. Was the Fun Kemashain Alain Verstein? From this we can already understand by Ben Shunamis, also by the son of the Shunamis. Was is nit kein mace, as it is nit metame. He's not a mace for sure. He's not metame. He said a mace needs to be metame. That's why Itziv Melech is not metame. So Ben Shunamis who's a chai for sure is not metame. So why are they asking that second question after already he told them that a mace is not, only a mace is metame, a non-mace is not metame? Now, over here, previously, we read the story of the Ben Hashunamis, but there was a story earlier of the Ben Tzarafis, who was resurrected by Elio previously. So why are we only asking from the Ben Hashunamis? Kushis HaMefarshim, wants to also answer the question that the Mefarshim asked, for Vos is there Shaila given Ben Shunamis? How come the question was about the son of the Shunamis with Elisha, who need wegen Ben Hatzarofis? Was is von Toit lebendig geworden durch Eliyahu Novi, which was resurrected from dead and became alive through Eliyahu Novi. And that took place freer before the Ben Shunamis durch Elisha, then the son of the Shunamis through Elisha. So how come we're not mentioning that? It's a whole discussion here in the others from the various different Mefarshim about these cases, but in the Pashtus way, the Rebbe learns it, they both died and they both were resurrected. But here the issue is specifically relates to the Ben Hashunamis and not to the Ben Hatzarofis. Gimel. The third question the Rebbe asks here in the Tshuva of the Dritter Shaila, what is the response that Rabbi Shua ben Chananya gave for the third question of the Anshe Alexandria? He said, "Liksheyichyu nechakim lehem." When they will be alive, we will figure it out then for them. Moshe Rabbeinu will come with them. So, if basically they didn't know the answer, Shua ben Chananya didn't know what the answer. He should have said, I don't know. Which is, the Mishnah it says, the measure of a chacham. What happens to a chacham when he doesn't know? What he didn't hear, he says, I didn't hear. And he admits to the truth that he doesn't know. So instead of saying, we'll be smart, he said, I don't know. Why didn't he say the language? Dalit. Vos is the dir chaloshun l'kshiyovei Moshe Rabbeinu. Why are we saying Moshe Rabbeinu? Generally, when we have issue, when there's things will be resolved that we don't know, we say Kshav Eliyahu. Unid v'loshon mikigoindo. And that as the language in such a situation is Kshav Eliyahu, Kiyitzebei, and Eliyahu, or similar to that, we use that language instead of saying Moshe Rabbeinu. Number 5. What does he mean when he said Kshav Moshe Rabbeinu Imohem? What is going to come with them? But he doesn't conclude on what, that he's going to resolve it. And he doesn't conclude as a vet but he will answer this. Similar. In the first language, the first Yikad Amri, he says, we will figure out them, we'll be wise for them. But he says, what's the Diuk Halosh and Vov, the sixth question? Why is he saying why with them? We'll figure this out. What is the Diuk Halosh Nimoim? And Zion, finally, Shinu has Sigman. There's also a change in the style. The first two questions, Ma'u Shetetame, would the Netziv Melech be Matame? Ma'u Sheitame is the Ben Hashunam is going to be Matame. The dritte Shaila is Tzrichim Hazo, or Ein Tzrichim, do they need Hazo? Or need Ma'u Sheyitzrichu Hazo? And all these questions the Rebbe is going to address and explain how it's all answered, and that was very clear in the flow of the Gemara. In Ois Dalet, the Rebbe explains that basically there's two aspects in order for it to be tumas meis, the impurity of a dead body. First of all, that there should not be any life force, the general life force. Not only a part of the life force, but the general life force should no longer be there. And number two, that there should be a body still, and a dead body. And this is going to explain to us the various different levels as they discussed. Anshe Alexandria were asking. Dalet. The Birbe Kolzeh explaining all this. Tumas meis is verbunden mit zwei Inyonen. The impurity of meis, of dead, of the body, is connected with two matters. Number one, Aleph, is there siluk hachayis, siluk haneshama naguf, the removal of the vitality, which means when the shama leaves the body. And the number two, there's a body there. The guf, zozaina guf meis. There has to be a dead body in order for it to be tumas meis. Und in einem von den Inyonim, seine do kamo protim v'dinim. Each one of these, how much of the life force removed, how much of a body it is, there are many details and halachas. Ubeklolos, we're talking about binyan halaf. In the first aspect, siluk hachayis, when we say that there's no longer an energy in the body, there's no longer a vitality in the body, meant as esvet nistalik klolus hachayis, that the general life force is removed. Only then there can be tumas meis. There needs to be a removal of the general chayis, as opposed to, for example, masha'en kain. As opposed to if you have a aver ba'bosar hamaduldolim ba'odam, by a human person, you have a limb or flesh which is detached from the person. So even though they are not able to go back to life and to Torah, they're still Torah, because the general life force is still there by the person. That's the specific life force for that limb. But the general person is still alive, so therefore they're not Tomei. Then as far as the body goes, Kuf Meis, when is there a body? Is Dafkeve mit sein Zura und Gestalt. It's specifically that his shape and his image is that Al Kupon Enlech Saguf Chai. It has to be similar to a living body in order to be considered a dead body. If God forbid, if a person's body has been burnt to the extent that the image has totally become decomposed, you can't recognize it's Torah. It's not metabolic. And there are several details and laws thereabove. And in them is Bashtanan the Chiluk from the Gimel Shailos. This is consistent. The difference of the three questions that they asked was the different various levels of the chayis and the body and the shape to figure out whether it's going to be Tomei Meis. In Ois Hey, the Rebbe will reject a possible explanation in the question of the Anshe Alexandria about what happened to the wife of Lot, that she turned into a pillar of salt, with the idea that in miracles, sometimes a miracle changes the entire nature. So in this case, she became a pillar of salt. She's no longer a body. Then there would be no tumor over there. Sometimes a miracle is only externally, which means that for the duration of the miracle, but then the actual reality is that the original state remains, and it's only for the duration, like with the Kriyas Yamsuf. So while it was split, but then as soon as the wind stopped, it came back to its old self. Then it means that it's still considered to be a body. But the Rebbe rejects that would be the question, whether it should be Tomei or not because of that, because it's not, that's a different issue then. Then it's not an issue whether she's Matame, it's an issue what is kind of a miracle it is. Let's look inside. Hey, the pastors will make you can't zogen. Simply, one could have said, as the erste Shaila, that the first question, the wife of Lot, should she be Matame? By stating them, consistent is that Ishtay Shaloit is geworden an Nitzid Melech, nit al pi derech hatava. She became into a pillar of salt. That wasn't a natural thing, nor that took place durch anes. It happened through a miracle. Und in Nissim seine Faran zwei Sugim. In miracle, we have two categories. One, Aleph, as their nest, is machlif dem teva mitzias von der Zach oifat zweite. That the miracle switches the nature of the item to something else. In the case that Moshe's hand became with leprosy, like snow. So what happened to him? So the leprosy became part of Moshe Rabbeinu. That was a new, true, natural reality. It came to him miraculously, but now his hand has tzaras. After the miracle, that leprosy on the hand, that was a natural thing. Now he has a hand with leprosy. How did we get rid of the leprosy? And there had to come a second miracle to take away the leprosy, that it should go back to its flesh. So he needed to have another miracle. So that's one way. The miracle basically brought in a new nature. Now we have the second nature. To get rid, in Moshe's case, from the second nature, we needed a miracle. The other way is, as dos base, as dos is nischadish geworden durch nes, that this that was renewed, that came about, the novelty that took place through the miracle, is nit durch chiluf tivei. It didn't change. It didn't come and change the nature. Nor behisofoi from teva b'chol rega, but rather this added over the nature every instance. Aderech is given by Kriyas Yamsuf, similar like it was by the splitting of the sea. Alderech zeh Kriyas Yamsuf, during the duration, it was a miracle every moment. As soon as the wind stopped, it went back to its original. Alderech zeh b'makas dam, similar also by the plague of blood. Was the vaser nepchel dam. The blood, the waters turned to blood. So even after the miracles, they didn't become new, not blood now. It's still water. They still remain that existent blood of water. What the miracle did, that at every instant, it turned the water into blood. And therefore, when the nest is when the nest stopped, is memela in this battle geworden that pichas hamayim ledam. So automatically it ceased the turning from water to blood. Now it's no longer blood. Now it's water. Das ist given the teuchen from their Shiloh. This was the contents of their question of the people of Alexandria. Can explain so. He is attempting to explain. Ishto shaloit ma'ushu tetame. Should she be metame? Those was your goof is geworden an Nitziv Melech. The fact that her body became into a pillar of salt. Unaton geworden zura v'tavnis von aguf. And it lost the shape and the image of a body. Is as geworden durch Hanes in the von Aleph. So that took place through a miracle in the first way. Then will darf es nicht metame sein. Then it shouldn't be metame. Hayois, Ados is clown with kintabris from a goof since it's not on all the shape of a body. So that's one way. Other, or the Nesses given Kaifan Abeis, or the miracle was the second way. Was das meant, which means as Oich Lachar them was his given and Tziv Melech, that also after she turned into a pillar of salt, is the Giblim Mametzias from Basar V'chulu, still remained an entity. Well, now you had an existence, she's still flesh chulu. A guf meis, a dead body. Then you should also have on her, applied to her also the idea of tumas meis. So the Rebbe zog, das is aber nit maspi. The Rebbe says that this is not a sufficient explanation to explain what the question is about. Ishtay shaloit, the Netziv Melech, whether she's metame, whether it still has the status of a mace or not. Das aber nit maspi. Warum lefizeh? Because according to that, is a shaila nit in them inyan from tumas mace. So the question is not really about what becomes tumas mace. Nor in them oifen hanes was sotir gemacht an Netziv Melech. The question becomes, what is the miracle? What is the type of the nes that made her into Netziv Melech? And if this would be the case, is yeder shaila of the three questions in an anderinyan, it's a different subject matter. Was this nit mistaber, not doesn't really sit well, and therefore the Rebbe is going to try to explain all these three questions. That the question by Loit and the second question that follows all follow the same chain of thought. So the first question is, that the Rebbe explains now, is what is that causes the tumah of tumas meis? Is it the fact that the body, the soul, leaves the body? So that aspect happened by the wife of Lot. The soul left the body. Based on that, she should be tummy. If it is the fact that the body remains dead after the soul left it, over there's no body left because in the Netziv Melech. See what the Rebbe explains. It's very fine chilik. We have to pay attention. The Yeshloimar, we can say, as der Teuchen von Zeir Shaila, Ishte Shaloit Mahu Shetetami, that the question of the contents of their question, whether Loit's wife is Matame, is Oich Benegeya der Geder for Tumas Mes, that also involves and connects to the definition of a Tumas Mes, was Vert Mitzad Siluk HaNeshama, that comes when the Neshama leaves. See Tumas Mes schafft sich von Etzem Siluk HaNeshama. Whether the Tumas Mes is created, the definition of Tumas is created just from the Etzem Siluk HaNeshama, from the sad fact that the Neshama leaves. We can actually see that. How do we see that? From them was Ever Amadudel is Toher. We can learn from this that an Ever which is detached is Toher Kinal. Ibald as Ba'im is not given Siluk HaChayis, because there was no removal of the Chayis over there. Choch as there is as Evan Ever Mace, he's still like a dead limb, and yet the definition has to be the removal of the Chayis. The removal of the Chayis wasn't by the Ever Hamadul. That's on one hand. Other Siluk HaNeshama is not a siba if there chalois from tumas meis of guf. Or we should say that the fact that the neshama leaves is the cause that there can be a chalois of tumah on the body. It's the body that becomes tumah, not the fact that it lost the life. But how could the body become tumah? It doesn't have the life. The tumah kum mitzad haguf. The tumah comes because of the body. Das heißt, tumas meis vert mitzad dem, that it comes from this when it's chal, and it applies and it rests of haguf was von ihm installed geworden in the neshama, on a body of which the neshama was removed. Und al derech wie me gefind dugmas shaila v'chakida zu in tzad hachiyuvi in kama mitzvahs v'din ha'torah. This is similar to what we find a question and this type of investigation, type of theory to try to determine. We're talking about the chiyuv, here we're talking about becoming tomei, but in many halachas, in kam mitzvahs din ha'torah, whether it's the act that causes it or it's the result. In this case, the act is that the chayis is left. The result is you're left with a dead body. So in some positive mitzvahs, we find this by the mitzvah smila. Is the mitzvah the act of circumcision, or the mitzvah is that the person should not be with a oral, should not be oral. Kisu Adam, is the mitzvah the covering of the blood, or the mitzvah is for the blood to be covered? A mitzvah smila. Say, for example, mitzvah smila, see that iker ha mitzvah is pula samila. Is the main mitzvah the act of the circumcision? Other than mekuben ikri, the main intention is the tetzor was kommt from pula samila. It's the result that comes from the act of circumcision. Those was said is nitkin oral, that the person is no longer stuffed, doesn't have that orla. And is known the lengthy discussion and what the difference would be about whether we say this or the other way. Similarly, when we have the mitzvah of covering the blood, is the main mitzvah consists of doing the covering. It's not important what happens after that. Or we should say, the mitzvah is the that the mitzvah is the result and the goal of the kisui, that it should not be blood. As their dams was verdeckt, that the blood should not be open, blood should be covered. And also in this, by B'kis Adam, there's many differences of the halacha. So, and similar to this is also the idea, the content. What is the question? Is the wife of Loit Metam. If they're gathered from Tumas Meis, is mitzad dem was dos is a goof Meis. If it is the definition of Tumas Meis is because you have a dead body, when there's silicon, the neshama is not a goyim v'siba, and the fact that the neshama leaves is only a cause that brings, and a reason was bringt him to sein a guf meis, that brings him to be a guf meis. Damit is verstandig, then it's understood. The pastor is very simply, as ishtu shel loit, that the wife of loit is not metame. She's not metame. Balz is not geblieben. Kein chaymer v'tzir from a guf meis. It wasn't left. No material, no shape from a dead body. If the reason that the tumah rests is because the neshama is no longer there, then you can say that the neshama left. So the leaving of the neshama is the cause. Then we can say that she shouldn't be tamei. Is given silicon neshama, because also by her there was leaving of the body. So the soul left the body, that made her tummy. So the fact that later on the goof is not there, that doesn't matter.